Okay, you're good.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September 11th, 2024 committee meeting for water and climate for the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. I actually, just before we kick off, wanted to acknowledge this is a very notable and important date for our country. And just if we could actually just give a moment of silence for respect for those that we lost in September 11, many years ago. Thank you all. And now I'm going to start getting emotional. And onward to our committee agenda, but let's start out with introductions. And I am just going to go around the screen on the names that I see. So let's start out with Nicole.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Nicole Bettinardi. I am the board liaison with OWEB.
Thanks, Nicole. Eric.
Good morning, everyone. Eric Hartstein, Policy Coordinator at OWEB.
Thanks. Bruce.
Bruce Buckmaster. I am a public at large member of the board and co-chair of this committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. And Bruce and I tag team, but as the other co-chair, I am facilitating this meeting. But if I have any issues come up with reception and such on my internet, Bruce will jump in. Sarah.
Hi, friends. Sarah O'Brien, OWEB's Executive Director as of about 2.5 months. So it's my first committee
meeting. And hit the ground running. I really appreciate all the work you're doing and the great leadership we've had from Stephanie to cover the interim. Megan.
Megan Kemple, Executive Director of Oregon Climate and Agriculture Network. I want to provide public comment.
Thanks so much for joining us. Dan.
Good morning, folks. My name is Dan Brown. I work for the Environmental Protection Agency in Oregon, and I represent the agency on the OWEB board.
Thank you. Lindsay.
Good morning. My name's Lindsay McClary. I'm a public at-large voting member on the board. I live in West Salem, and I work for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde.
Thank you so much. Stephanie.
Good morning, everyone. Stephanie Page, Deputy Director at OWEB.
Thanks. Alexa.
Morning, everyone. My name is Alexa Schmidt, and I am Water and Climate Coordinator at OWEB. And like Sarah, just joined at the beginning of July.
And also has hit the ground running. We really appreciate you stepping in, Alexa, and prepping the agenda for this meeting and really getting things going. Great job. Renee.
Good morning, everyone. Renee Davis, Acquisitions and Special Programs Manager at OWEB.
Thanks. And Brian, appreciate the chat. Not everyone on live stream could see the chat, so go ahead and introduce yourself.
Jamie, he says he's having audio problems.
He's having audio problems.
Brian is our OWEB board member, federal agency representative, and ex officio member from the U.S. Forest Service.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah, for stepping in. Brian, thanks for participating. I've had that situation before, but you do have to note that in committee meetings, it gets a little less formal, and so that we can tease you and assign you projects without you having to speak, have a response. So just a fair warning to that. And so that was Brian Staub, and then Brian Wolcott.
Good morning, all. Hi, I'm OWEB's Water Acquisition and Capacity Coordinator.
Excellent, and very ably carried us through during the interim of having a staffing assignment to this committee. So thanks, Brian, for all your work. My name is Jamie McLeod-Skinner. I'm an OWEB board member at large, live in Central Oregon, and along with Bruce, co-chair of this committee, and I'll just be facilitating today. So we start off with public comments, and then just to give a quick overview on the meeting, we welcome folks who either want to provide comments ahead of time or also provide comments at our meeting. Our standard agenda is to go through in a deep dive, first have public comment, then go through in a deep dive in a specific topic, committees to make sure there's no gaps and we don't lose sight of some of the important issues that may impact one committee or another. And then also talk about future meetings. And so always welcome public input on that as well. So on to the public comment. I look like from an email I received from Nicole, we had no written public comment. Is that correct, Nicole?
Yep, that's correct. Thanks, Jamie.
Okay, excellent. And then Megan, thanks for joining us. Please share your comments and input.
Thank you. My name is Megan Kempel. I'm the Executive Director with Oregon Climate and Agriculture Network, and we advocated for the $10 million Natural Climate Solutions Fund. And we're
Megan,
OWEB.
sorry to interrupt. I want to make sure you know we can see your notes right now. You're sharing your screen.
I'm
So
sharing
if you
my
don't wish to
screen.
do that, you have
That
a
was
chance to
not my
take them down
intention.
before anybody reads ahead.
Thank you so much. That's so funny. I'm so used to doing that in meetings that I just did it. Thank you, Sarah, for interrupting. So my name is Megan Kempel, Executive Director with Oregon Climate and Agriculture Network, and we advocated for the $10 million Natural Climate Solutions Fund. We're engaging with OWEB on their use of the funds for conservation management planning, technical assistance, and payment for practices via OAHP. And the farmers and ranchers in ORCAN's network are ready to implement practices that sequester carbon and mitigate climate change, but they need support, including financial incentives and technical assistance. And these programs are designed to do just that. Our partners and ORCAN together are ready to help roll this program out as quickly and effectively as possible. We're really thrilled that Alexa, OWEB's new climate water coordinator, is on board and has begun the community engagement needed to get this funding and technical assistance to Oregon's farms and ranches in a way that's equitable and effective for farmers and ranchers in Oregon. And I know that's on the agenda for today. We're going to engage actively in those discussions and engage our network of farmers and ranchers and farm service providers in the process. And we're ready to distribute OWEB's survey about the Natural Working Lands funds to our extensive network of farmers and farm service providers this week. The Natural Working Lands funds were a one-time allocation, and ORCAN's highest policy priority for this next legislative session is renewal of these funds. Tomorrow, we're co-hosting a ranch tour for legislators to demonstrate the climate benefits of the OAHP funds, and continuity of this funding is really critical. When funding is available 1 year and not the next, interest in programs decrease, and it becomes difficult for land managers and community organizations to anticipate what will be available and take best advantage of it. In order to effectively advocate for renewal of the funds, we need to demonstrate success and demand. Our understanding is that the Natural Climate Solutions Fund application period may not be open until January through April, which is late in the legislative session, to demonstrate demand to decision makers. And I understand from talking with Alexa that it may not be feasible now, that a survey has already been released, but just want to ask OWEB staff to reconsider inclusion of a question in the survey that can help demonstrate demand, such as, are you interested in applying for these funds? This would be kind of a pre-application survey included in the current survey, which could go a long way to demonstrate demand. We're also concerned that the engagement timeline, which would likely put distribution of funds in June, in the last days of the biennium, will make it difficult to demonstrate success. So we want to see this funding distributed to farmers and ranchers as soon as possible. So we ask that OWEB consider a shorter open application period to put obligation of funds earlier in 2025 if possible. Just want to reiterate that we really appreciate all that staff are doing to distribute these funds equitably and effectively, and we look forward to collaborating to engage our community in the process and use of the funds, and we want to help distribute the funding as quickly, equitably, and effectively as possible. Thank you so much for considering these requests for changes to the timeline and process.
Megan, thank you so much, first of all, for your work, for folks who put food at the table and helping to advocate for a key part of our economy in Oregon. So thank you for that. Also want to invite you to submit, given that they were written, you gave them orally, but to submit them also in writing, so we have them on record. And for public comment, as you know, we don't use that as a back and forth opportunity. So what I'll just flag for Alexa or Sarah, when we reach that agenda item, if you want to speak to any of the points that Megan raised, we welcome them at that time. But thank you so much, Megan, for sharing those thoughts, and also your great advocacy for a key part of Oregon sector and part of our partners, OWEB partners. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public who wish to comment at this time? Seeing none, let's move on to agenda item number 3, what we call the deep dive. So every committee meeting, we look in depth into some organization that we partner with, or some topic or some issue. And this is about the climate resolution implementation and measurement. Really appreciate staff bringing this back. This was something that was a key priority for the board, the full board. A couple of years ago, OWEB passed its first a resolution, which was a climate resolution, included a key component of it was also incorporating equity into our climate efforts and making sure we really put our money where our mouth is in terms of thinking strategically, in terms of investment of limited resources.
Jamie, I think we're losing you. Do you want to try turning off your camera and see if we can get you back? You're so choppy, we can't understand you anymore. Bruce,
I think
Okay.
it's maybe passing the baton to me and Hartstein to go over this item. So
That's perfect. Let's go.
Okay, well, we'll just dive on in. So Jamie framed it really well. We thought this would be a useful review for new board members as well as existing board members, because when it comes to implementation of the board's climate resolution, there are a lot of different moving parts in the different programs across OWEB. And the part of the resolution was to incorporate climate considerations into OWEB's grant making. So Eric Hartstein is going to go into the details and review kind of where we're at and where we're going in terms of incorporation of those climate considerations into OWEB's grant making, and get into a little more of the details of where the climate considerations are incorporated into the agency rules, as well as into grant applications and evaluations. So Eric, over to you.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. So yes, the climate-related evaluation criteria are being incorporated across OWEB grant programs. So we've had several open solicitation grant offerings now that have included the evaluation criteria related to climate. So that's covering the restoration, technical assistance, monitoring, and engagement grant applications. In addition, we've had the land and water acquisition grant offerings with the climate-related evaluation criteria applying. And then within the Focus Investment Partnership Program, the project level grant applications that each partnership is developing through the FIP program, the technical review teams are looking at those applications with an eye towards the climate criteria. At the programmatic level with the FIP, the evaluation criteria will apply through the next grant offering. And the reason why it didn't apply to the previous one, if you might recall, is that the board adopted the criteria about halfway into the last solicitation for FIP. So it didn't apply at the programmatic level. We're doing rulemaking with FIP right now. We're making sure that the RAC knows that in addition to any of the changes that we're proposing for the evaluation criteria, that they know that the climate-related evaluation criteria will apply at the programmatic level for FIP. In addition, with the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program, there's rulemaking underway to include the criteria into OAHB. So that's going pretty smoothly. And then once we have small grant rule revisions in place, we're going to be revising the application for the next biennium to reflect the climate considerations consistent with the criteria. So I will stop there, see if there are any questions.
Questions of committee members? Thanks, Eric, for that overview, and sorry for dropping off, folks. Next on the agenda is rural broadband, but and staff has been doing a remarkable job of taking a very challenging topic, since there's not a lot of solutions out there, and figure out how to incorporate them into our work. So really outstanding work, Eric, that you've been leading. Well, I'm surprised with this group. I thought we'd have some detailed questions, but I know that we've covered this in detail at our full board meetings as well as we've worked on this, so that update is helpful. do you want to go on and talk about the strategic plan?
Absolutely. And I'll pull it up here. So I think both of these items, 3A and 3B, it was in response, I think, to a couple of future agenda requests that came up at previous committee meetings, just kind of where are we at in climate resolution implementation and where are we going and how are we thinking about tracking progress? And so in talking about this internally, we thought it would be really helpful to frame this within the context of the strategic plan, because the board will be considering adoption of the strategic plan refresh in October. The updated strategic plan has an element with regard to climate resiliency. And so we thought it would be good to walk through that, look at the specific tactics that are included related to the strategic plan objective and priorities, and gather thoughts from the committee today on how that tracking could occur, gather your ideas. So I am now going to show my screen and find the right the strategic plan element. Sorry, folks, it's not showing up in my options. Let me just see here. I have it all pulled up, but let me try one more time. There it is.
And just while she's doing that, for members of the public, OWEB's in the process of updating our strategic plan. With a new director coming on board. We delayed it from our last meeting, but I believe, Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, that this will be coming up to our next meeting, the full strategic plan for public comment review. And consideration to adopt, is that correct?
Yep.
Thanks.
So we are actively talking about how do we track implementation of the strategic plan. That is something that we're discussing within the agency. And so just given the board's interest again in tracking implementation of the climate resolution, you heard kind of what we've done so far to implement that by adopting rules across agency grant programs, including evaluative questions and so forth. And so this is a kind of where are we going in terms of continuing to build out that tracking of the implementation. So what I thought I would do is walk the committee through what have we got for strategies and tactics in the and this is the draft that was presented to the board in April. So the near final draft, and just talk about what are your thoughts regarding tracking implementation of these tactics, and we'll gather your input today. It's a perfect timing as we're thinking about a framework for tracking. So we really see the strategic plan as an additional implementation vehicle for the climate resolution. And so just wanted to set up a tracking system that can include qualitative and quantitative elements and gathers the board's input. So I'm going to just start with strategy 6.1, increase grant making tolerance for bold and innovative action. And then go to the core activities here and the key outcomes, and then gather folks' input on what are your thoughts regarding tracking implementation of these elements. So in terms of core activities, I don't want to read to everybody, so I'm just going to give you a few minutes to read the core activities and the key outcomes and share any thoughts on qualitative or quantitative tracking mechanisms.
Stephanie, I know that it's best practice not to read slides, but I'm just thinking that if folks are online and the screen size is small, they might not be able to read it.
Okay, certainly.
So if it's okay with the committee, if you can actually read through and maybe even pause between, because that might prompt conversation then or discussion then. Is that okay?
Absolutely. And let me just see if I can zoom in without making it too big either. Okay, hopefully that helps a little bit. And then, yeah, I am happy to read. So the overall priority, it is one of 6 priorities in the strategic plan refresh, is take bold and innovative action towards climate resilience. There are 2 strategies within that priority. Strategy 1 is to increase grant making tolerance for bold and innovative action. So in terms of core activities that are in the draft plan, that includes, and we're really looking at how does this intersect with OWEB's grant making as a grant making agency? So core activities include training and facilitating and encouraging review teams, staff, and grantees to be more tolerant of risk and bold and innovative actions. So in terms of an outcome, just tracking that training for those different constituencies. Next, under the core activities, we've got assessing and refining lenses that are applied during application reviews to accommodate bold and innovative actions. So we're, in terms of outcomes, evaluation considerations are reviewed. In terms of the next core activity is showcasing examples of success and failure of bold and innovative actions to staff, grantees, and review teams. In terms of an outcome, we've got increase in learning through documentation and debriefing of successes and failures from projects. And I think often we've talked about this during strategic planning sessions. It is uncomfortable to talk about something that didn't work well, but that is a valuable piece of the learning process for our staff as well as grantees. And then fourth, we've got partnering with implementers and experts to share information about opportunities for learning about and expanding exploration and use of streamflow restoration via a session at Connect. In other words, a training for local partner organizations that occurs once per year, and an expanded version of the conference occurs once per biennium. And in terms of outcomes, we've got improvements in strategies, approaches, and practices. In terms of that streamflow restoration session at Connect, I think one challenge we see with regard to climate resiliency in our state is the projected impacts of climate change to stream flows. And we see several OWEB programs having a critical role to play in this arena, including the water acquisitions program that Brian coordinates. So he was part of a session at this year's Connect, and look forward to additional trainings at future Connects to help build local partner capacity on some of these complex water transactions that are involved in the acquisitions program. So yeah, any thoughts on tracking with regard to implementation of these different core activities to encourage bold and innovative approaches?
Committee members, oh, there we go. Lindsay, and then Bruce, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe this is something that's already been considered, but I think in some of the applications, thinking specifically open solicitation, there's a spot where folks can talk a little bit more about how their project does build resiliency to climate change. And so just wondering if we sort of already have some of maybe anecdotal metrics or a little bit more of the story that we can kind of pull out and plug into a database somewhere, or some of that we are already kind of tracking, like we've talked about in the strategy. Some of this stuff we're already doing.
Thanks, great comment. Stephanie, do you want to respond or just take that input?
Oh, keep going.
Okay, Bruce, you had a comment.
I just have a comment that we teed up, this committee teed up the DEI-EJ issues in the climate resolution, and they were later certainly addressed more fully in our DEI-EJ resolution. One of the things that was noted in both discussions was the importance of this bold and innovative action, and how DEI-EJ attention to that might increase and make bold and innovative action easier to achieve, easier to support as OWEB. I don't know if any of that needs to be addressed in the strategic plan or not, but I think those two resolutions go together to support this issue of bold and innovative action.
All right. Thank you. Bruce, I just wanted you to know I'm taking notes. If I'm not responding, I am capturing it.
No, thank you. That's helpful. And this is also, as mentioned before, often the conversations in this committee meeting are really queuing up and getting some additional deep dive input that we'd otherwise get at the full board meeting. Any other committee members want to comment?
Yeah, I can't find, I apologize. I cannot find my raise hand button. But I would just say, you know, I think you guys kind of rocked this a little bit. It's kind of hard. We really don't know yet what's going to be super effective as we deal with change in climate, and it's really hard as sort of people who are responsible for expending public funds effectively and efficiently to create solutions to take these kind of risks. So I just want to sort of acknowledge that, you know, it's hard work and it's challenging, and taking that risk and learning from failures is it's huge. This is really, really great work, and thank you. That's all.
Yeah, great comment. Sarah.
Dan's comment and also Bruce's and Lindsay's really prompted me to think. This is not answering Stephanie's question at all, so I apologize, Stephanie. But a request of board members as kind of members of this committee, and I know a number of folks are members of the DEIJ committee as well. You can really help with this as we bring bold and innovative projects to funding decision conversations. And I think that the board faces a similar challenge to often what staff faces internally, which is we put on our risk assessment, risk management, oversight, transparency, accountability hats, and it can be hard to know when to take one of those hats off and put on the bold, innovative action. And so, as you guys have been such a big part of this conversation and thinking through what it looks like to take on, you know, greater risk in our portfolio associated with some of these bold and innovative actions, I just want to ask our board members to keep that in mind as we bring you project funding recommendations, and think about providing that counterbalance, that we're all always kind of going in with our risk assessment oversight hat on, and to occasionally take that off and say, maybe we can handle a little bit of greater risk in some of these funding decisions in order to accommodate this, and help us bring that back. And I think that'll be a really productive tension for board members to bring and to sort of model for staff. So I'd appreciate your help with that in meetings as we go forward too, and helping bring the board back to some of these key priorities.
Yeah, and Bruce, just before I see your hand, just before we go to you, I really want to follow up on that point, Sarah, and also Dan's point. I was thinking about that as Stephanie was presenting it. That sense of learning from success and failures is critically important, and in especially because of Dan's comment of how much we can learn from that, and then also again Sarah's comment in the public sector, you're typically very cautious. But there's a lot we don't know. And so someone's got to figure it out. And being on the forefront of that, I think, is really valuable. You know, in the private sector, they do this all the time. It's called innovation. And right now, climate solutions need innovation and need creative thinking. So Sarah, to your point of striking that balance, I think is really key. I'd really encourage staff, when presentations are made on recommendations for funding for the board, to not shy away from framing and really calling that out and recognizing when there is a more of an innovative approach or a risk being taken, and to really have us lean into that. I think falling forward is the way we learn, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so to really encourage staff not to get caught in the structure. I mean, they're saying accountability and responsiveness to public, but it really then, I think, becomes a responsibility for the board to make that statement and make that public statement, because it gives it provides direction to staff, but it also provides that public awareness that this is a purposeful step we're taking. But it also extends to our project partners. If we're funding them and they're trying something and they fall short, if we learn from it, that's a success. And so to really communicate that to them as well, because I think we actually sometimes learn a lot more from quote unquote failures when it didn't go exactly as intended, but but we actually gain something of value from it. And again, in the private sector, you see this all the time, and this is how innovation works. Right now, there's a need for innovation in this field. So really, really appreciate that awareness. And I can tell you from a personal level, I strongly encourage it. And also to my fellow board members, it will be on us to make sure we're creating some of that space and support, public support, to make sure that we're helping staff move through this, because the pressure is going to be on them to not take those bold steps. Bruce, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Jamie. And I certainly agree with you on your comments. And Sarah, thanks for giving us, the board members, the challenge on this issue. I will make a comment that by the time projects get to the board, our ability to, thumbs up, thumbs down is pretty limited. And as far as initiating or supporting bold and innovative actions is somewhat limited. I think we can talk about it, and it is our responsibility to stay on top of that. Further down the process chain, the Eco Northwest document that talked about our DEI-EJ resolution, all the work that was done by staff and with Eco Northwest, spent some time talking about increasing diversity on our regional review teams. We also mentioned that within the I believe within the DEI-EJ resolution, as you made a challenge to us as board members, which I appreciate. I would like to return the favor and make a challenge back to the staff to say, if we work through this RRT and increase our diversity at that level, we may in fact get a head start on looking for bold and innovative actions in our grant making process. Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce. And Sarah, I see you take her off mic, but just before make a comment, one of the things specific to Bruce's comment that I would encourage us to think about is seeing things from a different perspective is in and of itself a technical form of expertise. So the board's really leaned into awareness and respect for Indigenous practices and things that have worked for generations that we're now learning from and more leaning into. I would encourage us, as part of partially our climate, also partially our DEIJ work, is to think about expanding our regional technical committees to also include a role for a diversity of thought perspective, and include that as part of that team. I think I would really feel a strong sense of that additional perspective is really helpful when we're hearing things queued up going for the board. And then one other thought that was triggered by Bruce's comments is, I know when staff brings funding proposals to the board, it's typically a list of things. There's a line, there's the budget we're looking at, and it's kind of it's well thought through by staff at that point, and it's more of a thumbs up, thumbs down. Given some of this leaning into innovative approaches, staff may consider having the line a little bit higher, and then having some options and saying, if you want to go, board members, staff strongly recommends, say we've got 10 projects and we've got funding for 5. We strongly recommend these top 3 that meet all the criteria, and then these additional 2. These would be the more traditional. These would be the kind of leaning into innovations that may succeed or may fail. And that, I think, would generate a really interesting conversation in the board level, and also explore, Sarah, just your point of the board's willingness to lean into some of these ideas and practices. And Sarah, you had a comment.
Stephanie, I think, was raising a hand much more responsibly than me. So Stephanie,
okay, sorry, and I'm not, because I've got on the screen, I'm not seeing all hands up, and so sometimes it pops. So thank you, Stephanie, please.
Yeah, it's not your fault. I don't know where the hand raise is while I'm showing my screen. So it's just, we're all doing the best we can. I did want to note that we do have, I'm showing the climate resiliency priority and bold and innovative action priority right now. There is a priority specifically related to DEI, and perhaps at a future DEI committee meeting, we might want to have the same conversation that we're having today about the climate objective focused on the DEI objective and metrics and tracking. We did cover a little bit of that at the last committee meeting, looking at the OWEB's DEI action plan, which we were required to submit with our agency request budget, and included some of that metric tracking in there, but we can certainly come back to that now that we've had the chance to think around both of these priorities today. I did want to mention too that we've tweaked our review team policy to allow for a little bit of expanded membership. And so just wanted to mention that. I don't want to take us away from what we're talking about now, but we can go into a little more detail about that at the next DEI committee meeting if that's the pleasure of the committee.
Thanks, Stephanie. Other comments from board member? I mean, sorry, from the committee members. Stephanie, is there anything else that you want out of this discussion that you want to prompt?
I'll just note to the committee meeting that we also have, there's a strategy 6.2. So this is the second element of priority number 6. And that relates to articulating what restoration is already doing to promote climate resiliency. So one of the things that we've got on here, which you'll hear about from Alexa in just a little bit, is relating to the Natural and Working Lands Initiative, distributing those funds, providing data about activities that contribute to carbon sequestration, administering those funds with a couple of different programmatic delivery pathways that you'll hear about here in just a couple minutes, while doing some very important diverse community engagement. And I know Alexa's planning to talk about that as well. Providing tracking tools and resources to help folks as they put together applications, as well as think about how to track the benefits of those applications. And then in terms of outcomes, we want to have familiarity with the available climate resources that the agency has pulled together, increase a common understanding of the benefits that are resulting from those projects, and just a greater appreciation and understanding of the connections between watershed restoration and climate resiliency all across Oregon.
Thanks. Are there committee member comments or questions on this? And because I can't see everyone on the screen, if you can't find your raise hand button, then go ahead and just jump in. And actually, specifically, I wanted to ask Brian, since you're not able to be here, do you have any? You want to give a thumbs up, Brian, or wave your hand if you'd like to? If you type any comments into the chat, I can go ahead and read those for you if you'd like.
He looks like he's typing, Jamie, for what it's worth.
He does.
See more people than you probably can.
He does.
Well, Brian's typing, Jamie, sorry.
Go
Sorry. I meant to sneak in after Stephanie's comment on the previous one and just appreciate Bruce and Jamie, both of you, your challenge and your comment. We heard, in addition to what Stephanie noted about the change in the regional review teams, heard some great conversation and sort of brainstorming along those lines at the OWEB all staff meeting yesterday. I know this is really a priority for staff, and Jamie, I think we will have some conversation about committee structure in October that I think could also, I know that the board discussed the possibility of kind of breaking up into multiple grants committees at our last meeting. I think that would be a structure that would really support our ability, at least starting at the committee level, to dig down into some of the funding line conversations that you just described. So I think it would be a really cool format to be able to pursue. Really want to bring that as a brainstorming option to the board in October, and not necessarily kind of program out your potential committee structure for you. But I think the staff would really welcome the opportunity to have some more of those in-depth discussions, either at the committee level or at the board level or both. So really appreciate the idea.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sarah and Stephanie, for your work on this. we continue to learn and grow and try new ideas. So we're doing that also with our committee level structure. So look forward to that conversation. The only comment I have on 6.2 is this looks a lot like our telling the restoration story piece of what we're doing. And it really helps to show the value of the work that our partners are doing through funding, and also this larger conversation of how do we serve all Oregonians? How do we incorporate Oregonians and traditional and non-traditional partners into this work of helping to preserve, restore, and protect what's so precious to part of the identity of being an Oregonian, and also identity of being someone who's in this land that predates Oregon, going back to time immemorial. Brian, thanks for your comment. And just to read his comment for those online, he just said, really appreciate the discussion, especially the importance of taking some risks and highlighting learning from failures. The latter is not easy to do and often avoided. So appreciate the consistency on that. With that, oh, Dan, go ahead.
There we go. I found my hand raise button, but then I lost my mute button. Yeah, I was just going to say, again, really support this. And this is kind of where you use the data to do that lessons learned piece, right? This 6.2 is sort of helping us kind of tease out what of the things that we're doing out there in the restoration world are providing the most benefit. So really good stuff. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thanks for, again, Stephanie, all your great work on this. Really appreciate you and Eric and all the work, and Sarah stepping and hitting the ground running on carrying this forward. If there's no more comments on this agenda item, let's move forward to the HB 3409 Natural Climate Solutions Fund and OWEB's role. And this also, of course, our public comment touched on this, but I'll turn this over to Alexa to provide some background on this.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for the opportunity to be here. I'm really excited to have joined the team at OWEB, and I'm really looking forward to working with the committee in this capacity. The co-chairs asked me to give a brief introduction to my professional experience and then discuss the Natural and Working Lands Fund's engagement process that I'm leading. So I wanted to just start by saying that I come to OWEB with over a dozen years working at the intersection of climate change and social impacts. I grew up in Vermont in the rolling green hills pictured here, and that played a huge role in my sense of place and environmentalism, and the privilege that I had the good fortune of growing up with clean air and clean water, and really wanted to spend my life working to make sure that that was the case for other people as well. So after moving out to the West Coast and getting my undergrad in environmental studies and ethnic studies at Lewis and Clark, I spent a year living and working in Bangladesh, where I was supporting research on climate displacement and early adaptations to rising sea levels and intensifying storms. So that's the photo in the top left there of the river, and just kind of the extent of life that happened along the banks. And that was a hugely informative experience. I mean, this was over a dozen years ago, 15 years ago. And I think kind of early in the conversations around how climate change was disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable, with Bangladesh being one of the early countries to feel those impacts. But of course, we now know no one is immune. And that's why we're here, and that's why we're doing the work that we are. So then I also spent some time as an intern at the Brookings Institute, where I helped make policy recommendations for planned relocations as a result of climate change. So we were making recommendations for communities primarily in Alaska and Pacific Islands, and how policy could help with those relocations for people who needed to move. And then for the past 10 years, I've worked at Mercy Corps a international aid and development organization that's headquartered in Portland. And my most recent role there was working to advance the use of technology and innovation in our climate adaptation programs. So I worked most extensively on a program in Kenya, and those are the other two pictures here on the right and far left. And this was a drought response program and long-term natural resource management planning process, working with pastoralists and county leadership in the drylands of northern Kenya on the Somali border. So this was trying to bring community leaders and local government together to make decisions about restoring the grasslands for both carbon benefits and grazing land for the pastoralists that depend on them for their herds. And I spent a good bit of time there when the drought was most severe and the consequences were really, really clear and apparent, as shown with this cattle skeleton on the left there. There were remains and carcasses all over the place. There was a lot of livestock and wildlife deaths as a result of the drought. So then I wanted to work more locally and bring these skills and experiences to working on social justice, climate justice, and adaptation in my own community and the place where I live and play. So really happy to be at OWEB. I'm going to talk a little bit through my process in engagement around the Natural and Working Lands funds. So for a bit of background, these funds were allocated to 4 agencies, including OWEB, through House Bill 3409, with a focus on carbon sequestration and environmental justice. And these funds provide 1.5 million to OWEB to route through the open solicitation grant process and 750,000 through the OAHP pathway. And these provide a unique opportunity and statutory direction as compared with the lottery dollars that we administer. So I do want to highlight kind of the unique opportunity that we have through these funds to advance some of the strategic priorities that were discussed previously. So my first kind of task with these funds is to conduct an engagement process around how we might provide a grant offering that's focused on the intersection of carbon sequestration and environmental justice. So over the next 5 months, I will be doing just that. And then using the information from the conversations and survey that I conduct to build the application and grant offering. So just to talk through what the next few months will look like. In September, I have developed and rolled out a survey questionnaire that has already gone out to coalition advocates as well as a number of partners in the environmental justice community. This survey will be open until the 4th of October, after which I'll pull everything into a report and use the results of the survey to inform listening sessions at the end of October and early November. There will be one listening session for open solicitation pathway and another for the Oregon Ag Heritage Program, because the offerings are a little bit different. And I think the programs that we will support through both of those pathways will be slightly different. And then at the end of the month, I'll pull those listening session findings together with the survey results. And then use that information to tweak the applications as needed and pull together a tailored technical review team. And then in January, I hope to have the solicitation for the Natural and Working Lands funds roll out alongside the open solicitation process. So it won't really appear as a separate grant offering to applicants, but we'll use that opportunity to really make an explicit call to environmental justice communities and organizations working in the carbon sequestration space. And then I did want to respond to Megan's earlier comment and just say that I really appreciate and hear the concern about the timeline, and want to note that I'm doing everything possible to meet OWEB's commitment in the proposal to conduct a public engagement process, while also doing so in a timely manner given the start of the next legislative session. So really exploring how to achieve both of those things as soon as possible. And then also just want to call out the earlier discussion around innovation as well, and note that this is a really exciting program for its opportunity to advance the strategic plan around learnings and bold steps that advance the state's mitigation goals. So with that, I did want to open it up to some questions for the committee that I have been thinking about, and I really welcome your feedback on. So these are some kind of questions I've had, but open to other discussion as well. One being, how do you envision OWEB balancing carbon goals with community co-benefits? The second being, what would a successful natural and working lands project look like? And what about an unsuccessful one? So with that, I'll stop there and open it up to questions and discussion.
Alexa, great presentation and fascinating background. Sometimes having experience outside of one's own culture really opens one up to understanding things. So I didn't know that about your background in both Kenya and Bangladesh, but great background. And then also just to say, I've often heard Vermont referred to as the Oregon of the East Coast. So
Exactly.
So there we go in terms of, but what I'd actually, Stephanie, I see you got your hand up. I'll go to you next. But what I'd actually like to do is, I love the way that Alexa has prompted these 3 questions. And I'd really like to go around the horn and ask all the committee members to run through and answer these questions. So Brian, get to typing right now. I'll come to you last, but otherwise I'll go around person by person on the board members who are in the committee to ask you to actually, whether you can always say pass on a question, but really to get your thoughts, because these are very well thought out questions. So thanks, Alexa. Stephanie.
That's a wonderful idea, Jamie. Thank you. I just wanted to say how excited we are, first of all, to have Alexa on board, given their background and just approach. And I just wanted to emphasize that the dollars that came with this legislation are unique in that they're not the lottery dollars that we administer through traditional grant programs. They have their own sideboards to some extent. And one element of the legislation is that priority will be given to EJ communities and tribes. So again, just a really exciting and unique opportunity with these funds to further several of the objectives in the strategic plan.
Excellent. Thank you for that comment. And then just in terms of people on actually, Dan, you popped up, and then I also saw Bruce and Lindsay. So Dan, I'll go to you. Just before I do, Alexa, also thank you for responding to the public comment. We talk about how important it is for public engagement, how much we appreciate and really value public comment, and really appreciate your speaking directly to Megan's concerns that she spoke to earlier. So thank you for that. Dan, would you like to share your thoughts on responding to Alexa's 3 questions?
These are not easy questions to come up with a quick response on. So, I mean, I may have to take a little pass to think about these. I do think we got to find a way, right, to get the co-benefits in the carbon goals. I think the space of where OWEB works in watersheds is a really prime space to do that. There's a lot of great sort of restoration work that I think will ultimately help store carbon as well as deliver clean, cool water to both communities and species that rely on it. We have some of the most productive forests in the country, if not the world. And those forests are providing all kinds of benefits. Our houses are built from those forests, and our drinking water is provided from those forests, and those forests have opportunity to store a lot of carbon. And so to the extent that we can figure out the right way to get in, to continue to get all of those benefits from our amazing forests, I think is a space to think about with some of this stuff. And you know, what would success look like? I don't think we know yet. I mean, things are changing and they're changing fast. I mean, we got wildfires all over the place, burning up some of the carbon that we've already stored and impacting all of those benefits that I just talked about. So it's we got a lot of tough things to navigate through, and we got a great team of people to start working on it. So I agree, Alexa. Great hire, OWEB, and welcome to the party. And I'm leaning heavily on you to answer these questions for us. That's all. I'm just kind of rambling now, so I'll stop and let you move on, Jamie.
Thanks, Dan. And actually, I'll go to Brian next because he typed in some of his remarks. Just before I get there, I'd also thank you, Sarah, for putting them in the chat, but I'd also encourage you to send these out as email as well, because I'm sure it's going to be one of those situations where people think of things afterwards. And you mentioned some of the outreaches and the information outreach. If you could actually include committee members on that, but also specifically with some of that outreach and questions. I was thinking a lot about our former board co-chair, Eliza Jane, who's also raised some insights. And if you could also include her on the outreach that you send out to the specific committee on some of the follow-up that you're going to be doing, the things you're sharing with the public. If we could just be CC'd on that, so we could see some of that and it could help to engage us also. So to read Brian's comments, he said a successful NWL project would be highly integrated and provide multiple outcomes rather than just one. And he also offered a technical question back. So that's the ultimate strategy when you can't answer a question, to ask another one. I'm teasing you, Brian. Do carbon sequestration components of NWL focus only on restoration enhancement of that process, or also avoidance of carbon losses? For example, avoiding pending degradation of wildlands, avoiding uncharacteristic wildfires. So that's also in the chat. You might want to incorporate that, Alexa, into your comments. And with that, I'll go to Bruce. Bruce, do you have thoughts on the three questions?
Like Dan, I'm not sure that I can immediately talk about how to balance the carbon goals with community co-benefits. I was remembering that chart we were using as we did the working on the climate resolution that showed so many co-benefits. And I think to answer this, I'd like to be able to go back and take a look at what co-benefits and how that might how we're going to balance them. The success thing is a little easier for me. It seems to me that a successful natural and working lands project will generate other people wanting to do the same thing. Or something similar to it, saying this works, this helps, this has economic benefits or long-term investment benefits for our community, for the farm, for the ranch, and neighbors saying, I think I'd like to do that, or I'd like to know more about it. So success will engender imitation and duplication, and an unsuccessful one will not. That's all I have.
Thank you. Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you. I think I have the benefit of not going first or second, so I've had a little bit more time to think about it, but agree with the other board and committee members that it would be great to kind of digest this a bit, spend some thought on it and circle back. But I do have a couple things that just jump out to me. One, I'd like to say I really agree with Bruce's feedback there about kind of exciting others to duplicate the effort and kind of have a ripple effect. That's not something that had come to my mind. So I really love that idea. But in terms of like balancing the community co-benefits, two things kind of jump out to me, and they're kind of maybe more on the simplistic side, but one would be this work would generate jobs within a community. So generate sort of green jobs. I know sometimes it's hard to like have a job created by a single grant that blinks on and then blinks off. And so like some sort of sustainability for doing things in a better way to build climate resilience. And then also having communities become more climate resilient. And the thing that comes to mind for me is just having more of an interface or protection from catastrophic wildfires. Sorry for the noise there. And then for me, like thinking about what a successful project would look like, I think anything that kind of moves the needle towards our metrics and our goals, and building off of what Bruce kind of said is like building that community awareness and drive to kind of do this work and kind of ignite people on the mission. And then an unsuccessful one for me would be something that was a really great idea, but couldn't really ever get off the ground for whatever reason. There were roadblocks, there were some other failures that might have happened, but the money was there, the people were there, but for whatever reason, it just couldn't launch.
Thank you. Great, really great comments. And to your point of going last, I mean, that's the beauty of being a facilitator. You push other people to have to go before you and give, and then you try to repeat all their ideas. No, I think they're all really great comments. And just to queue up Alexa, I would just ask if you would have any comments on Brian's question that he's got in the chat after my remarks. But to the other things to add to what I thought were very good comments from my colleagues. One, yes, share them with us so that we can, as other thoughts come up, we can get back to you on things. But on the first one, envisioning the balancing of the two, I think part of the goal for me is also being able to communicate the value of carbon goals with community co-benefits. Achieving carbon goals are community co-benefits, and part of this work is to also be able to communicate if it's not seen or understood at this point. So that's kind of a nuance to it. I think a successful project for me, going back to a previous conversation we had in a previous item, is really learning from the project. We're still having to learn so much. And so, and that ties into the unsuccessful one, if we've learned nothing. So success, failure, but if we've learned nothing, that's to me an unsuccessful project. A project that intended to do one thing and fell short, but we learned a tremendous amount, that's a successful project for me, in my mind. And then also just incorporating our partnerships, but building partnerships, both traditional and non-traditional, leaning into this work, traditional partners, but also really developing the value. And that goes, I think, to Bruce's comment of others wanting to replicate. I think that's a great insight. So that's an initial response. But again, Alexa, I love this, prompting up some questions for the committee members to think about. But do you have a response to Brian's question about the carbon sequestration components of natural working lands, focusing only on restoration enhancement, but also or avoidance of carbon losses?
Yeah, thank you so much for the feedback. I've taken a bunch of notes and this is really helpful. To answer Brian's question, I think, yes, the funds can focus on the kind of avoidance of carbon emissions to the extent that it still has a sequestration and community co-benefit function. So I'm doing some kind of early thinking about what that might look like, but I think to your point, and to Lindsay's about wildfire, job opportunities that help with forest thinning might be a good example, right? So we're maintaining forest health, providing the community co-benefit, and also the additional benefit of hopefully helping to avoid wildfire or catastrophic wildfire in those landscapes. So I think, yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. Great question, Brian. And he just mentioned the comments to also thank you for your feedback. One of the things that struck me as you were speaking is we talk about the community co-benefits and relationship with the community, and just to challenge us, are there seen and unseen communities? And so especially in our DEIJ work, are there communities that we're not hearing from or seeing or getting feedback from? Typically with natural working lands, we're focused on landowners, and there may be other folks in the community who either work the land or are not in a traditional partners, are not in a power position to weigh in. And I would just encourage you, Alexa, we've had a lot of those conversations before, and I know the OWEB team has had a lot of internal conversations about this, again, as part of our DEIJ work, of serving all Oregonians. Just something to think about. Sarah, do you have a comment?
I just wanted to support and follow up on that, Jamie, and Alexa probably won't want to toot her own horn, but I want to share that I've seen her and helped her connect with a number of environmental justice groups and sort of coordinators, spokespeople, bridge organizations. Really want to appreciate that effort and let you know what's going on behind the scenes. And I think, that really takes us back to Megan's comment from earlier too, which is much appreciated. And I think Megan's had also just in conversations with the coalition, some great ideas about how we can kind of balance the need to move forward quickly on this work, and also making sure that we bring the appropriate equity lens and remove barriers, and that this is an area where hurry hurts, right? And so we want to move fast and we want to do it right, and we got to figure out the productive tension, and Megan's been and the coalition have been great partners in that. So we often find ourselves, I think both of these committees, and it's interesting to see how interrelated these committees have become and really fundamentally are. A lot of times we're trying to apply this lens retroactively to work and to programs that have not been developed with a strong equity lens or a strong climate lens. And in this case, boy, the legislature just pitched it right across the plate for us, and we want to really make sure we hit a home run with it, right? We have the language that we need and the opening that we need to make sure that this has a strong and earnest and authentic lens on environmental justice benefits with the climate nexus. And so, to me, the successful one is a project that would have been difficult for us to figure out how to fund under some of our other funding sources. And this gives us an opportunity, to Bruce's point, to really highlight, to be a strong funding partner, to be an accessible funding partner. And I think that'll make a really strong case for continuation of these funds if our first couple of projects really hit it out of the park on each of those criteria and focus areas. So really appreciate the conversation. This has been really helpful.
Great and excellent. And Alexa, given your background and some of your work, having that, this is both art and science. And so being able to really have that visceral understanding and respect for communities is such a valuable approach to bring to it. And also fits in very well with the OWEB tradition that our staff do such a great job with. Megan, thank you. Megan Keppel, thank you so much for your feedback and your work and collaboration on this. And again, your advocacy for folks who are working to put food on our tables and having to make sure they're an active part of this conversation and they're well represented in the conversation. And then also would just ask Megan, if, one of the things I found in working across the state and across with different communities is sometimes there's language differences. And I realized I was falling into the lexicon of DEI and DEIJ, and that's something that happens a lot in Salem and also on the east side, well, more along the I-5 corridor. That tends to be more typical language that's not often heard, even on this side of the hill. I live in Central Oregon myself, and have family in-laws who go back to ranching in Eastern Oregon. Megan, if you can help us, if there's language barriers that we're finding, or you think our language is not being able to reach out and connect with communities, please do help us with that feedback as well, because our goal of the DEIJ work is really to serve all Oregonians and serve all Oregonians well. And that's really the purpose and goal there. But if we do fall into language that may make it tougher for people to hear what we're trying to accomplish, that feedback would be very helpful as well. So thank you for that. And then, it's funny, we've queued this up, but it really goes into the next agenda item so well. And this next agenda item, it's a standing item on our agenda that talks about committee priorities and also intersectionalities between other committees. And how this got to be part of our standing agenda is that we found that there were, even with our focus on water and climate, there are sometimes other aspects of OWEB's work that were kind of, we'd become a bit siloed, and we weren't necessarily talking about DEI work. We weren't necessarily talking about, and I'm sorry, we weren't necessarily talking about how well we are incorporating serving all Oregonians. We sometimes we're not incorporating some of the conversations about specific grants or some of the other work that's happening. And so the purpose of this item is really to have folks who are part of other committees to be able to say, yeah, we're doing this work, or there's a gap here we need to cover and need to include in the conversation, but to make sure we're not leaving gaps in our work. And one of our committee members who could not attend today is actually co-chair of the DEIJ committee, so she usually has a comment. But if any committee members, of any members of staff want to weigh in now and talk about or share any insights on overlap or intersectionality between the committees or other OWEB work, that'd be very welcome. And just go ahead and put your hand up and jump in. Well, go ahead.
Okay, great. Don't want to get ahead of any of the committee members, but I'll just talk while other folks are reflecting here. So did want to mention, first of all, I'm sure Kelly would appreciate that I will put in a plug for a co-chair. She was looking for a co-chair for the committee. She is attending the Tribal Natural Resource Work Group, which is a government to government meeting of tribal natural resource directors and state agency representatives. And I will just mention that Alexa, as well as the other agencies receiving natural and working lands funds, are presenting to the group later on today to as another opportunity to gather input. I think that the topic we just covered is such a great intersectional item. And as I was looking through kind of priority 2 of the strategic plan here, and I would just note there is a ton of intersection between the 3409 topic and the natural and working lands funds and that priority in our strategic plan. We've got the natural working lands funds as one of the tactics listed under objective 2 of the strategic plan. So that was something we spent quite a bit of time on at the DEI committee, was talking about not only that objective, but the DEI action plan that we submitted with the agency request budget and kind of the specifics of the proposed strategies and tactics over the next biennium.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for that input on that. Yeah, it's again, this intersectionality work is so critically important, and so appreciate that. And your specific reference to the strategic plan. One of the things I had provided comment on in the past is are we incorporating? I mean, we've had in our I guess our current and our prior strategic plan, there were some areas that were specifically called out, and they are now called out as part of components of our strategic plan as proposed going forward. And I think that's going to be an ongoing challenge to make sure we don't lose that intersectionality. And so that, incorporating that into the language in our conversations and incorporating these committee conversations and full board conversations, I think is especially important. Other members of the committee who want to comment on some of the overlap? Bruce, and then Lindsay, I don't know if you have any thoughts from the grants committee. Bruce, go ahead.
It's concerned me for quite some time when I heard, and not just once, that OWEB was the funder of last resort for a number of groups, saying that it was more difficult to go through the way we did our grants, and we've done a lot. We've worked hard and are continuing to work hard at making the process easier. I look at intersectionality and I keep thinking about across the board, we're trying to remove barriers to participate and to work with OWEB. We're trying to incentivize participation across all Oregonians the way we have said we're going to serve all Oregonians. So we need to make all Oregonians as aware of OWEB, the possibilities of OWEB as we can. All those things, I think, go back as a strategic emphasis for us to make the intersectionality between grant making, DEIEJ, water and climate, all of those things having to work together. So if we address what it is that we're trying to do, I think how we intersect will become very apparent. The way it is at this committee meeting, when we talk about it, when we incorporate it into the resolution, when I sit on the DEIEJ committee as well, it also comes up referencing grant committee. So I think we're doing a great job because a great job of maintaining the intersectionality and communication, because we are all looking at trying to do a very specific set of tasks to achieve the all-encompassing benefits that OWEB can provide to Oregon.
Thanks, Bruce. And as a friendly internal challenge, I would agree with you that we're doing a great job of really challenging ourselves to and really trying to. Sometimes it's for someone else to say if we're actually doing a great job. And so to remain open to that and invite that feedback as well, I think helps us to learn and grow.
Yeah, thanks.
Friendly and respectful, comment. Lindsay, any thoughts that you have, especially from your committee?
Yeah, thanks. And I at the end might pause because Dan Brown's on the grant committee too, so I'd like to save space for him. But a couple thoughts that come up to mind is just a reminder that the OWEB board is going to be up for revising the FIP priorities, I believe, beginning in 2025. So I know we've kind of been talking about that, but just don't want that to fall off folks' radar because that could be a bit of a heavy lift. For the whole board, but certainly maybe in some of the committees. And then a thought that has kind of come up for me is that I'm not on the DEI committee, but it sounds like a lot of what we do here in the Water and Climate Committee does overlap quite a bit. And thinking that there may be a refresh or a revisiting of what the committees are and what they are working on. Wondering if it would make sense to combine those two committees and then have folks either in two separate grant committees or maybe a FIP committee or and then the rest of the grants. That could get very creative and don't have to give any energy to this thought if it's too much, but I think there have been some conversations about we've done a lot of work and where to go now, and just wondering if we can consolidate some and branch out where there's maybe a heavier lift in other areas.
Yeah, great insights. And I think I've heard Sarah echo that to a certain degree as well, in terms of that consideration process for something for the board to reflect on. Excellent. Dan, did you have a comment? And then Brian, also, if you have any additional thoughts, please go ahead and type them in and I'll share them with the group.
Yeah, and unfortunately and regretfully, I missed the grants committee meeting last week, but bigger picture, we heard a lot from Eric this morning talking about how the climate initiative and the climate criteria is already being incorporated into grants. We heard Stephanie Page talking about the review teams and the efforts there to be more inclusive on the members of those review teams. So, I mean, all of the great work of OWEB rolls out through the grants, and so how we build that into the solicitations and the review teams is really a huge part of it. And I think OWEB staff are doing a pretty phenomenal job at kind of integrating the sort of goals and objectives that we're all kind of developing together here.
Thanks, Dan. And always, yeah, we can never say enough how much we appreciate the work staff is doing to really, like I said, it's art and science, but also comes with a real personal commitment. And I've seen that consistently across the board from the OWEB team. Really appreciate that. And just want to note that Brian, who's doesn't have access to his audio today, but he did type, he doesn't have any input on that. I also wanted to open up just any comments from OWEB staff on this point of intersectionality and priorities. Is there something we're missing? Is there something that, from your perspective, be helpful for board members to reflect on? Okay, seeing none, going on to the next agenda item on future discussions. So we have as an attachment to our agenda an ongoing list of topics we've covered before, especially those deep dive conversations I mentioned at the top of the meeting, how we really want to go into depth on certain topics, either crossover and intersectionality with other organizations, but also sometimes on specific topics and invite speakers to come in. There's also a wish list of future topics. And I know something that's come up before, and especially someone who's not attending now has brought up a specific on the water policy priorities. And I know, Stephanie, you and your team have done a lot of work to queue this up. So wanted to do both. Stephanie, if you could share the work you've done and the proposal for our meeting in December. And a lot of work has gone into this. And then also to solicit from committee members any thoughts for future meetings, things you'd be interested in discussing. So first, let me turn over to Stephanie.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Yes, at a couple of previous committee meetings, committee members had mentioned the idea of having the Legislative Water Caucus come and talk about policy priorities. They had presented to the Legislative Commission on Indian Services, I think, a few months ago. And so there was, I think, some interest in having a similar presentation at the committee meeting. So what we went ahead and did, just because the caucus as well as the governor's office is booked far out in advance, and they wanted to have some mutual priorities that are ready for prime time. We went ahead and put a tentative hold on their calendars to come to the committee meeting in December and talk about joint water policy priorities for the 2025 legislative session between the governor's office and the Legislative Water Caucus. So just wanted to let folks know we do have that tentatively slated for December.
Thanks for all your work on that and really being proactive on the requests that have come up. Thanks, Dan, for your thumbs up. Can people committee members just give a thumbs up if you're good for that for December? Yeah, great work on that. And we're really excited to hear that. And I assume that would go into our deep dive discussion because there'll be a lot on that. So really appreciate that. And you might want to queue that up also for the members who are not able to attend today. I know especially Meg would be really interested in that. Other topics that committee members may be interested in discussing, or staff, things that are hot topics and issues that have come up. This is also, Alexa, just going forward, if there's things that are hot topics that others are discussing or opportunities to have a deeper discussion on topics, please, offer them up so that the committee can kind of thumbs up or thumbs down. And then just to set the stage, we typically do is we have our wish list. And then staff lets us know what is kind of doable in terms of their workload for the upcoming session. So there's sometimes there could be something that we're really interested in, but staff are slammed, or there's additional work that needs to go in that we'll have to just put that off to a future meeting. But this is an opportunity to really talk about topics and then also get feedback from the OWEB team on what's kind of a possible conversation for our next cycle. Any other topics that committee members be interested in having us getting a presentation on, or having us have a deeper discussion on? Bruce.
We talk a lot about outreach, and we have staff that spend a lot of effort on doing outreach and promoting what OWEB is doing and showing the general public. I think at some point it might be nice to have a small, at least a short presentation or an opportunity to discuss with the specific staff that's involved with outreach about what to let the committee know what they're doing vis-a-vis climate. Maybe to offer them some input on what we're trying to do, find out what they're doing, and spend some more time coordinating between the committee and the staff efforts that are happening every day that we may not know about.
Thanks. Great comment and input. And seeing some nods on that. So something to add to the list, Alexa, for future consideration topics. Any other recommendations or requests for future topics to consider or look at? Seeing none, and I also mentioned to members of the public, you're also welcome to provide as letters, as a public comment letter, so also suggest topics for us to consider and review. Just wanted to put in that reminder as well. And with that, then just moving on to good of the order. Are there any other hot topics, issues, words of wisdom, insights, profound thoughts from anyone for the good of the order? Seeing none, not that we're not having profound thoughts, it's just a matter of sharing them. I just want to make that clarification to everyone. With that, just really appreciate everyone's engagement. Great work, Alexa, on prepping and presenting this first meeting. We're delighted to have you as part of the team. Great job always of our OWEB team of stepping in and all the great work you're doing, not just what the public sees, but all the behind the scenes work that's going on. So thank you all for that. And if Alexa, you just took yourself off, do you have a comment, or are you just gearing up?
I was just going to say thank you everyone for the feedback. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. And also thanks from Brian in the comments, Brian Staub. Great work, everyone. Look forward to our next committee meeting in December. And before that, our board meeting. Sarah or Stephanie, could you just remind the public is when our next full board meeting is and where it is?
Our next full board meeting is in North Bend, Coos Bay area. It is the 3rd week of October. Nicole, what's the date?
Yeah, I should have prompted Nicole on this one.
22nd?
No problem. It's the 22nd and the 23rd. Yeah, and it'll be at the Mill Casino in North Bend.
Excellent. And of course, the public is welcome to attend, and we do make an effort to get around the state to get feedback and be accessible to folks throughout the state.
Let's go support our community economic vitality in North Bend. It'll be a great time, a great tour. We really, for board members, we really encourage folks to come in person if you're able to make it and get to know our partners on the South Coast.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks everyone for a great meeting, and then we'll see you at our full board meeting then, and then later at our December committee meeting again. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.